Welcome to Catastrophe Chronicles. I'm Arin Babbick, and this is the podcast where routine turns to chaos and sometimes ends badly on the seafloor.
And I'm Katie Babbick. I have a sinking feeling about this one.
As did many on August 12th, 2000, when one of the worst submarine disasters in history took place in the Barents Sea. So let's dive into the story of the Kursk. Welcome back, everyone. I've been really looking forward to this episode.
Me too.
This time, I'm telling the story, and Katie gets to be horrified.
Yes, I'm going to be super duper crazy horrified, and I'm sure I've heard absolutely nothing about the Kursk ever.
It's not like I've talked about it before or anything.
No, I'm really excited about this. We've been talking about this podcast for a long time, and it's a lot of fun when we have our discussions at home, when we're not on live mics, because so many times I'll tell you, this horrible story about whatever it is, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, it's like that insert sea disaster. I mean, it happened earlier today with tell me again, it was that Civil War sub.
Oh, the CSS Hundley.
Yeah, I was talking about some ship that sunk in the Philippines, so I guess it did apply more here, and you were like, oh yeah, it's like that other sub that sank 3 times.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm really excited. I love your sea stories and just generally when you tell me stories. So it'll be a good horrified.
I'm looking forward to this one. Before we really get rolling into the disaster.
Yeah.
Because it was
disastrous.
A complete disaster. I just wanted to say, I know that we joke around a bit here on our podcast, and I personally use humor as a coping mechanism. But all jokes aside, this episode involves a lot of people who are still around, friends and family of a pretty terrible disaster. It was only about 24 years ago that this happened. So I want to take a moment and acknowledge their tremendous loss and extend our heartfelt condolences. And hopefully we honor the memory of the 118 submariners who lost their lives as we retell this story of this tragic event.
I really love that. That was really sweet of you to put that in there. A way to make me look terrible. I want to dive in. Can you tell me more about it? So I want to know.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to know everything.
I'm taking a page out of your book and I'm starting with a quote.
I love quotes. Give it to me.
Until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore, you will never know the terror of being forever lost at sea. And that's from Charles Cook.
Oh, shit. That is right in the feels, man.
Tonight, because the Kursk was a Russian submarine, we're drinking White Russians.
I love White Russians.
They are delicious.
I don't know why I'm whispering.
The anticipation, the drama, the story of the sinking of the Kursk, or its designator K141.
Oh, yeah, because subs always have those, or is it all ships? Is it ships or just subs that have the...
All ships have a designator to them. And subs in particular also have a project number associated with the line of production of the sub. And then also a name for it. So the Russians called the Kursk itself, its name is the Kursk. And then the class of sub, as the Russians called it, is the Ante 949 Alpha class.
Has a lot of names.
Yeah. Better known to us in the United States and the rest of NATO by the designation Oscar II class submarine. It's a SSGN, or Guided Missile Nuclear Submarine.
Okay, we're going to pause here and just remind everyone, Arin is a Navy veteran and he's still in the reserves. I promise those acronyms all mean something. I, too, have no fucking idea what they mean. So you're not alone, listener.
After the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russian naval activity dropped off pretty hard for lack of money, funding for their various fleets. Lots of ships fell into disrepair. Some subs were even converted to deliver food to various ports, especially in the north. The Barents Sea is up close to the Arctic Circle. If you go from the Norwegian Sea up around the corner to the northern coast of Russia. That's the Barents Sea up there.
It's not the Bering Sea. It's the
No,
Barents Sea.
the Bering Straits are over by Alaska, I believe.
So this is the other side of Russia?
Yes, this is on Atlantic side.
Okay. I'm tracking. Gotcha.
It should be noted, the Oscar II is a massive submarine. It's just massive. It's over 500 feet long.
Oh!
So that's like 2 jumbo jets, 747s placed in line.
Whoa! I didn't know they made subs that big.
It's not the biggest one.
No way!
Russia had another sub, the Typhoon, that was basically an underwater aircraft carrier.
For real?
Mm-hmm.
Bananas.
They had 3 of them.
Do we have anything that big?
No. The Typhoons don't work anymore. They don't run. One of them is like welded to a pier, and they're using its reactor to power a city.
I really want to make a joke about it's not about the size. It's about
the motion of the ocean.
Just so you know.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna try to stay away from like tons of technical details.
Thank you.
Because 1, they're pretty easily looked up.
2, I won't understand.
There's that too. On board the Oscar, they could carry a complement of 28 torpedoes.
Okay.
There were 6 torpedo tubes in the bow of the craft.
Is that a lot?
It's a lot.
Okay.
Plus the 24 vertical launched cruise missiles
Oh.
along the side of her hull.
Okay.
So they had hatches that could open up and these missiles can fire out of them.
Okay.
She's a carrier killer. The Kursk specifically, its construction had been started during the Cold War,
Oh, okay.
but they ran out of money and they didn't finish it until later,
Gotcha.
right? At the time, this event, the Kursk was the newest guided missile submarine for Russia.
The newest technology or just the newest built sub?
The newest built sub. Now,
Okay.
some technology was older, but they had some new developments on board as well.
Mhm.
Now, in Russia's trying to come back, the newly elected president, Vladimir Putin, wanted to reclaim Russia's spot as a world power. As part of that effort, the Northern Fleet, which is up in the Barents Sea, was going to conduct the largest naval exercise since the fall of the Soviet Union.
Whoa.
And this was due to take place in August 2000.
Okay.
This is their summer exercise. And they've always had a summer exercise, but for a while it was just a handful of ships, nothing big. But this one was supposed to be grand and show the West
Mhm.
that they were back.
It was some serious saber rattling, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. The exercise consisted of somewhere around 30 warships, 4 submarines, and a bunch of support ships and aircraft.
Oh, wow.
This exercise was also of pretty high interest to primarily the United States, Britain, and Norway.
Okay.
Obviously, Norway and Russia are like neighbors. They share a border.
Right.
And then the UK is right there as well.
Mm-hmm. And the U.S. just has their fingers and everything.
Yeah, we like to do that. At this point, it should be noted that the makers of the Kursk had dubbed her as unsinkable.
Oh, shit, we got a Titanic going on.
They actually said that. They put a lot of engineering into her. She was supposed to have all these really modern safety features and double hull. She had an inner pressure hull that was pretty darn thick. And then there's up to 6 feet of space between that inner hull and the outer hull.
That's a lot of space.
You got to fit the cruise missiles.
Oh, that makes sense.
So she's really wide.
Right.
She's about
She's a thick girl.
60 feet wide.
That's wide.
On August 12th, Saturday, Kursk was due to fire exercise torpedoes at the Peter the Great during this exercise.
At Peter the Great?
It's the Northern Fleet. It was their flagship at the time.
Oh, not. I was like.
Yeah, not at the person,
what?
Peter the Great.
Okay.
So as we go through this, a lot of Russian surface vessels are named for various Russian heroes.
I mean, it's the same thing the United States does,
Oh, yeah.
right? That makes sense.
At 8:51 a.m. that Saturday, the radio call from the Kursk to the fleet saying, "We are ready for torpedo firing." That was the last contact with the Kursk.
Oh, no. And that was on the 12th?
On the 12th. Now, submarine communications is tricky. And this is something that I think a lot of movies and a lot of documentaries and or podcasts like ours or books kind of miss a little bit. One of the books I read in preparing this episode called A Time to Die hit on it better than most. I want to illustrate the point a little bit better. When a submarine submerges and they're no longer at periscope depth or on the surface, you can't get a hold of them. It's not like you can call them up. You can't send a radio signal and have them receive it unless they're trailing some sort of equipment or something. But when they dive, they're out of contact. And this is pretty well understood in navies.
You're not worried yet.
No. And there's a lot of these documentaries about the Kursk talk about how they were repeatedly trying to radio her. Now, if she was supposed to have remained at periscope depth, that would make sense. But if she submerges, you're not going to get in contact with her until she comes back up.
So is she supposed to be at periscope depth then, or was she supposed to be diving?
Well, it would make sense that for when she was going to fire the torpedo, that she would be at periscope depth to see what she's shooting at and make exactly sure.
That makes sense.
All right. Now, exercise torpedoes, they don't have an actual live warhead on them.
I would hope not.
Because you don't want to blow up your own ships. There were obviously other entities in the area observing this Russian exercise. As I mentioned, it was a pretty big interest to the Western countries. And we had United States submarine up there, the USS Memphis, monitoring. There was a surface vessel that's actually from my neck of the woods. From what I did, I sailed on ships like these, or like this one, never on this particular one, but on her sister ships, the USNS Loyal.
Oh, those little like ferry boats that you used to take out?
Ferry boats. That's cute. They kind of look like them a little bit.
Kind of.
But
y'all look up a picture of the IUSS boats. They look like ferry boats.
The Norwegians had a boat up there
observing,
and the USS I already said USS Memphis. The USS Toledo was on her way up to relieve the Memphis.
Is that normal when other countries, I don't want to say enemies, but like not friendly countries, to have that many boats from like not pals hanging out watching these?
If it's something particularly large and of interest, yeah. And it's not like they spy on us too.
Sure, it seems like a lot of boats. That's a lot of boats hanging out watching.
Well, it was a big deal. It was the first time that Russia was doing this large of an exercise.
Yeah.
And collecting all the data on it that you could made sense. With that being said, whenever a Navy is going to do an exercise like this, they put out through international agreements, this is kind of the law of the land now, that you let everyone know what you're going to be doing, especially if you're going to be firing ordnance.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Several of the surface vessels were firing missiles. There was a Delta IV, another submarine that test fired ballistic missiles as well. And then a couple of submarines, including the Kursk, who had a successful missile launch, was also going to be firing torpedoes. So you let everyone know that you're doing this, one, because keep them out of your water space, and two, you don't want an incident.
Yeah.
You don't want someone to accidentally get shot and, increase tensions.
Yeah. Be bad news.
From the other side, if you're going to go and observe something like this, you also don't want to put your ships right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you don't want to put anyone in danger.
You don't want to put your people in danger for
nothing.
Exactly. They stand off a bit.
Okay, that makes sense. So
USS Memphis is observing this exercise, collecting data, signals, and acoustics and things like that. At 11:28 a.m., Memphis gets hit by a shock wave. That's the equivalent of about 220 pounds of TNT.
Whoa.
It was later worked out. It measured about a 1.5 on the Richter scale.
Holy moly.
2 minutes later, they get hit by a second larger one that was about 250 times the size of the first one.
Oh my God.
Measured a 3.5 on the Richter scale. Memphis initially weren't quite sure what had happened, but it became apparent pretty quickly that these were underwater explosions.
Did they think they were being attacked?
They would have obviously checked, but they knew they hadn't been hit directly.
Okay.
Now, Memphis wasn't the only one that detected this. Something of this magnitude
Everyone saw it.
goes. USNS Loyal, the other boats in the area, there were platforms in the Pacific
Oh my God.
that detected this explosion.
In the Pacific?
In the Pacific. Near
So
the,
it went like through the...
under the ice and...
That's crazy.
And through the land, too.
Through the land?
Seismic...
Wait. No, stop. I'm sorry. Through what land?
I'm getting there.
Oh my God.
So seismic stations in Norway, in Canada, in the U.S. picked up the seismic waves.
Did it cause like a little tsunami too?
Not that any sources described.
Okay.
The seismic station in Norway, they have several, and one of the purposes of them was to measure and detect underground nuclear testing.
Right.
Because
they're right next to Russia.
vibrations travel.
Oh, that too.
Now, their scientific director at the Norwegian entity that does this is Norsar. Mm-hmm. So the scientific director there, his name was Frode Ringdahl.
That's a good name.
His specialty, what he had spent his time learning and studying, was discerning the difference between earthquakes and explosions.
What a cool job.
Because of the underground nuclear testing.
Yeah.
Now, this is important and it'll come up later.
I'm sure. That's a nifty job. It never occurred to me that somebody would have a job like that where your whole life is spent. Is this Mother Nature saying fuck you? Or is this a nuclear bomb saying fuck you? That's cool. Science is rad.
This was a huge event, right? So this massive shockwave from this underwater explosion. Obviously, the Russian ships that were there had to have felt it, detected it too.
Probably stronger, right?
They were closer.
Yeah.
So sure, they did, but none of them made any reports about it. Now,
none of them made any reports that we know about.
So sure, there's that we know about, but there's a lot of data that came out of this. Ugh. And a lot of interviews that were conducted. A lot of you'll see why there was a pretty large, not just from inside Russia, but from the world, outcry for information.
So this is going to be a story that I'm not just sad about. I'm going to be mad.
Oh my God, you're going to be mad. Okay. I'm going to piss you off with this one.
All right.
There's a lot of reasons that go into why none of these ships, these Russian ships, or submarines that were out there too, because remember, there's 3 other submarines.
Three other Russian ones,
yes.
Right? Yeah. Oh.
Said anything. So there was a culture in the Russian Navy and in the Russian military in general of not reporting bad news. Your commanders don't want to hear bad news. And
oh, yeah, because if you say nothing, it just didn't happen, right?
So during World War II, there was actually some planes. They were flying back from a mission, and they flew over a contingent of German tanks approaching the city. And they radioed in to report it, and they were scolded. They were screamed at. Yeah.
Because the Germans came? Like it was their fault?
Because they were saying something about it. Because they didn't want to hear bad news, and they were told like their instruments must be faulty and stuff like that.
That is so dumb.
Oh, it's asinine.
That's so dumb. What a man.
But on top of this culture of not reporting bad news, there's a lot of, it didn't involve them and they didn't necessarily know what it was. And there's a lot of secrets, compartmentalized secrets at this time in the Russian military.
That's kind of a thing in the U.S. military too, though I think the U.S. would probably report it. But
yeah.
Compartmentalized information. I mean, I've dealt with you having a security clearance for years. That information is compartmentalized and annoying. So I can see that.
Well, even down to the submarine commanders were given their orders for this exercise in sealed envelopes.
Oh, wow.
Individually.
Oh, so not even like...
So like one captain didn't know what the other was doing.
That's
necessarily.
Bananas.
There was an assumption that,
must be normal.
Well, maybe they're testing a new thing, a new depth charge, a new missile or torpedo or something.
Right.
And, well, that's not what I'm doing. It's not what my orders are. So and they didn't think anything of it.
Nothing to do with me. It's fine.
Yeah.
That's legitimately crazy. It makes sense when you're talking about, these war exercises, because if everyone knows what everyone else is doing, it's not going to be that effective of an exercise. But it never occurred to me before this that how much of a problem that could cause, that if you don't know that there's going to be an explosion here during a war exercise, you might not think.
There is an inordinate amount of planning that goes into naval exercises or military exercises in general because of that reason.
That makes sense.
So as I already said, the Russian Navy basically didn't do anything when the Kursk didn't report the successful firing of their torpedoes.
Right. Because maybe it's normal.
It also wasn't uncommon for there to be technical faults and things not work. So Peter the Great, I think it was Peter the Great, one of the surface ships had fired one of their missiles and it failed pretty spectacularly earlier that day. They're used to this.
It's fine. It's just not working.
And they didn't think that there was a problem. Maybe they were having difficulty with their comms, or for some reason they were out of contact. But it was okay because their next comms window, the next time they were scheduled to report in, was at 11 p.m. So they're like,
Gotcha.
Okay, we'll just see if they pop up then.
Okay.
That's all well and good. And I do want to highlight the good things that happen in the story too, because there's a lot of not.
I like good.
So before 11 p.m., at 5 p.m., the rescue operations chief for the Northern Fleet, Captain Alexander Teslenko, was called.
This is the Russian Northern Fleet. Okay.
And he put the submarine rescue ship, the Mikhail Rudnitsky, into a 1-hour standby. Basically called everyone back and said, be ready to sail.
What does that mean? Like, be ready to go save people?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. That's good. He was ready. He didn't care that it was bad news.
Some information someone was concerned.
That's good.
At this point.
It's really depressing that there's only one.
Well, it gets worse on the Mikhail Rudnitsky. So it was converted from an old lumber carrier.
Oh.
And it was chosen because it had cranes on board. And they could put the submersibles on the side. But, like I said before, after the fall of the Soviet Union,
oh my God,
the funding for the Northern Fleet especially was pretty slim pickings. And one of the big things that didn't get funded was the rescue services.
Oh my God. Because that's not important.
So the submersibles that they're using are over 20 years old.
Ugh.
Their best submersible, which we're going to talk more about this later, but their best submersible was a mini sub called Bester.
That's a good name. Bester.
And it basically attached to a mothership.
Okay.
It was another submarine.
Oh, it's like the kind of submersibles that they used to explore the Titanic.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
The mothership was decommed and pulled apart.
So it didn't have a mothership?
Mm-mm. So
it's just an
the
orphan
Bester
little baby?
was sitting in a warehouse.
Oh my God.
So we'll get into all of that. So this is in the North Sea.
Okay.
Right. At 7 p.m., Fleet Command issued its first orders to redeploy and divert ships. And then they sent out a couple of planes, IL-38 Mays or the Aleutian 38 Mays. They're an anti-submarine warfare plane. They can search for submarines.
So we're at 7.5 hours later after that first, or after the booms. And that's the first they started sending out people to go looking? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, it's the first time that anyone was actually moved to start looking to see if there was a problem. Now, the planes flew over the exercise area and they were looking for signs of a wreck. So when you're looking for signs of a submarine explosion, implosion, you're looking for debris on the water, oil slicks.
That kind of stuff.
Or, a sub kind of wallowing on the surface.
Well, that might give you a clue.
Sure.
Is it normal that they waited 7.5 hours? I mean, given that subs take such a long time to report back in and when they're submerged.
Yes, and
that sounds crazy to me, but I'm not sure if it should.
My personal opinion, I would think that 2 explosions of this magnitude would be investigated, or that were not expected, not part of the planned exercise, would be investigated quicker.
Right, because the fleet commander would have had all the information about what was expected, right?
You would think so. Oh, what was expected? Yes.
So he knew that they were unexpected, these explosions.
That information didn't get to Popov.
What information did he have?
So we'll get into the information flow of all of this too.
No, but I mean, what did he have that made him send out people to
the fact that the Kursk had not checked in.
That's it. That's why
they hadn't radioed.
Okay, so this is not crazy.
Now, at this point, there had been several attempts to radio the Kursk.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I said before, comms with a sub is tricky.
Yeah, okay.
Call it a gut feeling.
That makes sense.
Popov. He's a kind of a complex character, but I'll say I kind of like him. And
Yay.
You'll see why as we go through this. So just after 8 p.m., Admiral Popov orders contact with the Karelia, which is the Delta IV class ballistic missile submarine that I talked about prior. They tell Karelia to report any communications or contact with any other subs in the area that they may have had. Their reply is that they had no comms with any other subs, but that Karelia had been struck by 2 powerful underwater shock waves, probably the result of a series of detonations.
So he found out.
It's starting to piece together. 11:30 p.m. Popov issues the emergency alarm to the Northern Fleet.
He waited 3.5 hours after finding out that there was detonations.
Remember that all this information is not like he's talking directly to these people.
3.5 hours, though. Am I misunderstanding? That seems like a long time.
It's also not like you would expect.
Obviously.
There's a lot of times they have to report to superiors of theirs and get information back.
That's crazy.
And it does seem like a very long time. So the message that goes out to the Northern Fleet is the submarine Kursk, tactical number K141, commanded by Captain First Rank Gennady Lyachin, is missing. A search and rescue operation is being launched.
Dun, dun, dun.
That statement right there should stick into your mind as we go on. Remember, they knew the Kursk was missing.
They knew it.
Just after midnight, the Rudnitsky sets sail. Right, this is the submarine rescue ship. Has 2 rescue submersibles, the AS-32, which I'm only ever going to call that because its full name is really long and I will butcher it if I try and pronounce it.
Bloop, bloop.
Crazy Russian name. And Pries.
Okay.
Now, AS-32 is like, it has manipulative arms on it, but it has no real rescue capability.
Okay.
Pries is the one that has a secondary chamber where they can fit, it has a docking capability, they can fit survivors in, and that's how they can get sailors from below the surface to the surface.
He's our pal.
But Pries had problems, and I'll talk about those later. Right, and I already talked
Getting real tired of your later.
I told you about Bester already, right? So Bester's sitting in a warehouse.
Bester is out to pasture.
Around 5 a.m. on Sunday, August 13th, duty officer at the Navy's Moscow Command Center called Rear Admiral Gennady Verich, who is the head of the Russian Navy's search and rescue forces. So not the North Fleet, but all of Russia's search and rescue forces for the Navy.
Big boss.
They tell him that North Fleet has lost contact with the Kursk. He told the duty officer to call if any new developments came up and chose to stay home.
Oh my God.
Convinced that it would probably be some fault with Kursk's communication equipment or confusion over when she was actually supposed to report in.
Good God.
In his very small defense, he'd had that happen before.
Doesn't matter.
I also want to note that the commander of the North Fleet, Admiral Popov, this guy here, Gennady Verich, they're veteran submarine commanders. They've been under the waves.
Okay.
Right?
They know what's what.
After a few hours of not getting any news on the Kursk, Verich went in to gather his staff to plan a response if this loss of the sub was confirmed. He also decided to fly to Severomorsk, one of the Northern Fleet's submarine ports. It's one of the main ones, and assume command of the rescue operation himself.
Okay.
In Russian politics at this time, there were only 2 people who could actually talk to President Putin about military matters.
Only two?
were allowed. Those two people were Marshal Igor Sergeyev, the defense minister, and General Anatoly Vashnin, and he is the head of the general staff. At 7 a.m. on Sunday, Sergeyev is the one who gets to interrupt Putin, who is on vacation.
Oh, shit.
And while their call is still classified, the exact contents of what was said has never been released.
Okay.
It's pretty clear that Sergeyev probably underplayed the situation pretty hard.
Gotcha.
Putin stays on vacation. Sergeyev now believes, he recounted this after, that he wasn't given all the information on purpose.
Sure.
To make him look incompetent, foolish in front of the president. Now that is real shit because there's a lot of political maneuvering and infighting
It's
in
nonsense.
Russian politics.
What the?
So now we go to Vidyevo Naval Base on the Kola Peninsula. This is up on the Barents Sea. This is the home port of Kursk.
Okay.
It's pretty remote. Only the families and the Navy personnel and some support people and their families live there, either on the base or in the very small town just outside of base. It used to not even be shown on maps. It was
super speak.
It was-
It's my base.
It was pretty secret for a while, and it was chosen for its remote location. You don't just have people wandering up there. And I kind of want to highlight this because it's different than all the Navy towns that we've lived in, where there's the base in the middle of a big old city.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the case.
The base was the city.
Basically.
Gotcha.
And it's also cold as shit.
It's Russia.
And the housing for the families and the military members was pretty shoddy and run down.
Oof.
Again, no money.
Isn't that how it always works?
Their
Military
heat
housing.
didn't even work.
Oh.
So the families, the wives and the families would, because they also didn't have really enough food either. So they would go out and harvest plants in the surrounding area. This is, again, Sunday morning. The base headquarters started to fill up with more officers than were usual for a Sunday, especially in the morning. And calls started coming in and leaving from multiple locations. As this is happening,
It's getting spicy.
rumors start to spread because it's a small community.
Mm-hmm.
The name Kursk is overheard. These rumors get pretty wild. People are talking like they heard that this sub sunk. No, it's on the surface. It doesn't have power. No, it's on fire.
Oh.
There were just rumors all over the place. And obviously this gets to the families.
Yeah.
And
It always gets to the families. Always.
one of the sailors' mothers, and her name's going to come up several times,
Okay.
Nadezhda Tilik.
Okay.
She didn't actually think her son was in danger, but she did want to find out where this rumor was coming from and why.
Damn right.
So she left her house and as she was going through base, kind of trying to track down the source of these rumors, she ran into the captain's wife, the captain of the Kursk's wife, Irina Lyachin.
Okay.
Now, they both heard the rumors, but they were still unsure what to think, really. As they're talking, the deputy base commander walks by, Mikhail Kochkov. They flag him down, and they start asking him questions, and he promises to check at headquarters and come back with any news. He comes back a little bit later, saying half of HQ is closed, and the other half is filled with officers just passing the time of day. Relax. Everything is fine. We would know if there was an emergency.
They already knew.
The emergency call already went out to the North Fleet.
I remember what
the
you told me.
message.
I'm
So-
remembering. You told me. I
Yeah.
got it. Those motherfuckers knew.
So at this point, it's clear Russian Navy knew there had been a disaster and were covering up. But no one knew the extent of the damage or if there were any survivors. Kursk had several safety or emergency features. They had an emergency buoy that was supposed to deploy in the event of an emergency.
That would make sense.
And this buoy floats up to the surface and it sends an SOS. However, the buoy had been disabled
What? Why?
because the previous year, the Kursk had deployed to the Mediterranean to spy on our ships, U.S. ships,
So what? If they
And
have
because
a
they were
disaster?
on a clandestine mission, they didn't want the emergency buoy to accidentally get released
So
and give away their position. No one had re-enabled it.
oh my.
Now, they also had an escape pod in the sail. The sail, if you think of the submarine, it's that long tube-like thing, and then there's always that like building structure on the back of it, on the top.
Yeah.
We call that the sail.
No way. I
Right.
didn't know that. Okay. I
So
always called that the bridge.
sure, it's a conning tower, or
It has a lot of names, but the sail. Okay, the sail.
they had an escape pod in that, but that
Okay.
obviously hadn't surfaced.
Son of a.
And they had comms equipment, but
Not-
obviously there was no
Not
signal.
calming anyone.
And then finally, there's also an escape hatch in the very aft compartment. So the Kursk is comprised of 9 different compartments,
Okay.
and the very last one, the 9th compartment. right?
Gotcha.
So there's an escape hatch back there. It has a little tower, a cylinder.
hmm
There's a bottom hatch that you can climb up into, close that hatch, and then open a valve and let seawater in so that you can pressurize yourself, acclimate.
Oh.
Now you have a breathing apparatus
Okay.
too. It's not good for very long, but you have a
But you
breathing
have one.
apparatus
Yeah.
and a survival suit.
How many people were on the Kursk?
118,
And how many people could fit in that?
one at a time.
Okay.
It took about 10 minutes
Per.
per person.
All right. Okay.
This runs into the issue of pressurization because depending on how deep you are,
Yeah, you can get completely crushed.
you can get crushed, or if you're acclimated to the pressure and you come up quickly, which
get
you will
the
with your
bends.
survival suit, you get the bends. And
You
that's
die.
a pretty agonizing death.
Yep.
If you're shallow enough, you got a chance.
Right. But if you're sunk.
Well, the Barents Sea
Not
is
great.
pretty shallow
Oh.
in general.
Here I was assuming it was a sea, so it's not shallow.
I mean, there are parts of it that get up to around like 2,000 feet, but where the Kursk was operating, it was only about 350 feet deep.
No. What?
Mhm.
Okay. This is.
I'm going to draw your attention to how big the Kursk is again,
Yeah, it's enormous.
over 500 feet long.
Right.
So if she were to stand on end,
She would be out of the water.
be a whole bunch of her sticking out of the water.
That's of. Okay. All right.
8:39 a.m. Rudnitsky arrives in the exercise area. This is the rescue ship.
Oh, okay.
They first had to find the Kursk.
This is the army ship, right? Like with just the arms, not with the stuff to save
the
sailors.
army,
The army. It's
the
got like
army ship with the arms.
Sorry, not like the army, like the land army, but it's got the arms.
So no, this is the one with the cranes that has the submersible that has the arms.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Also has prees. So some of the ships already had some idea of where it was from active sonar that they had used.
Mhm.
Now, there's a lot of secrecy around the events of this morning. There was the deployment of a highly classified, like spec ops submersible called the Dronov.
Spook ship.
Yeah. It had no rescue capabilities, but it is probably what they got video footage of a lot of this.
Wait, there's video footage,
Not that we've seen
but it exists.
in the Kremlin.
Oh my word! Fucking Putin.
Now that this mini sub is under the direct control of the general staff in Moscow. So like super secret, right?
Spook ship.
Mm-hmm. They had discovered the bow of the Kursk in complete ruins.
Wait. This is the day after
Yes.
at 8 a.m,
Yes.
and they found the bow ruined, which
The,
means
the whole sub.
the bow is not connected to the rest of the sub.
No. The bow is just kind of gone.
They know where it is,
Yes.
and the bow is gone.
Boom.
So at that point, I mean, is it reasonable for me to? They're all dead.
Mm.
They're no.
The reactor compartment and aft of the reactor compartment seemed intact. So it's possible that there are survivors.
And they know.
They know. The only way to rescue these possible survivors is now through the 9th compartment escape hatch.
With a 10-minute.
Unless not if you have a rescue submersible
Gotcha.
that can
Okay.
dock
So they could
with
do
the
it.
hatch.
Oh, okay.
5:20 p.m.
Mhm.
They deployed Prees, the rescue submersible. Now, as I said before, Prees had problems. 20 years old.
Mhm.
She had pretty weak thrusters, So she doesn't move very fast, very strong. And her battery life sucks. The designers put her at having about like a 6 to 8 hour battery life, but in reality, it's not even half that.
Whoa.
Now, that's a pretty small amount of time to be going down 350 feet, doing stuff, and then coming back up, because you still need juice to come back up.
Yeah.
Now, as she descended, it got kind of dark, because...
It's underwater. It's deep.
Yep. Right. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. On reaching the Kursk, they report that there's a current of about 1 knot or 1 mile an hour, right? So
That's
the
not
water's
bad.
flowing about 1 mile an hour. Not terrible, but it does mean they have a current to contend with. Now, this current is flowing from the bow over the sub to the stern.
Front to back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the typical way they would do this is they drive into the current, like against it, to where they need to dock. But the Oscar II, or the Kursk, has a giant rudder just behind that hatch.
She's a thick girl with a big booty.
When she's on the surface, this rudder's sticking up there.
Gotcha.
They also have a lower one, but
So they can't swim over it. They can't swim into it, right?
right. So this presents them with a little bit of a challenge. So they decide they're gonna, kind of drive diagonally over the boat and let the current push them back towards the hatch. Right. Now they get there. They get to the hatch, and the pilot is pretty good, and he's made contact several times, but they can't make a seal for some reason, and their batteries are draining quickly, and they had to go back to the surface.
Oh.
Now, as they go to leave, they get pushed by the current, and they ran into the rudder of the Kursk. They regained control. They didn't end up sinking, too.
Oh my God.
It was a close call, but so they go back up.
I'm guessing they were damaged.
A little bit, but they can make repairs on the Rudnitsky.
Okay.
6:30 p.m., the dive ended. 1 hour and 10 minutes was the amount of time they had been down.
Good Lord.
That's how fast their batteries drained. And then it had to take 12 hours to recharge the battery. Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
So now, Captain Teslenko, the Northern Fleet rescue chief, used this time and ordered AS-32, the other submersible on Rudnitsky, into the water. And he wanted to make a proper survey of the wreck. But the pilot for AS-32 couldn't even find the Kursk in the depths.
All right.
Spent several hours just like circling around, and because its navigation equipment and its sonar were just pretty crappy.
Why couldn't they just use sonar to find it in the first place? Like, isn't that what sonar does?
Well, so active sonar, sure. So active sonar is like echolocation, where you send out a ping, a sound, and it bounces back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, if something's on the seabed, it blends with everything. Now, if you just have a chunk of metal there in a bunch of silt, which is what the sea bottom was there, it should show you a stronger return on that. But the Oscar II was basically coated in rubber to reduce her
so
active
couldn't find her
returns.
with sonar.
It made it a lot harder.
Charming. Okay.
Right? Subs are
They're supposed to be sneaky.
Yep.
That makes sense.
right. And the other form of sonar we talked about in terms of hearing the explosions is the passive sonar, where you listen to sounds coming in.
Yeah, it makes sense why they couldn't find it with passive sonar, because it wasn't doing anything.
Yeah,
but
it's not moving. It's not making noise.
Yeah.
Sorry, AS-32 did find Kursk, but by the time it did, it was only able to make what was called a limited observation pass before it had to return because its batteries were drained.
I'm guessing that's just what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
No new information from them. And then there's more bad news. The Fleet Weather Service for the Russians' Northern Fleet was predicting a summer storm supposed to roll in the next 24 hours.
Great.
None of these ships, especially, and the one that really counts is Rudnitsky,
They don't even work in good weather.
it had a single screw, meaning one shaft and one propeller. It didn't have stabilizers. It didn't have thrusters, so it couldn't.
It was not going to
maintain
work in a
station.
storm.
No.
Yeah. Cool.
Monday, August 14th. By this time, many different entities had a good idea that something bad had happened in the Russian exercise. But there also wasn't a lot of communication between these entities or countries,
They're not friends.
or even within the same countries' organizations. We run into problems a lot where different entities don't necessarily share information super freely with each other.
Gotcha.
So this information flow is kind of slow. It's also easy to assume that someone else is already doing something about it. Now, in Norway, Admiral Einar Skorgen, who's the commander North Norway, noticed that there was a change in the Russian surface picture. All the surface ships started doing something different than what would normally be done in an exercise like this.
Okay.
So he sent a plane up to do a flyby of the exercise. And from the information he got back from that, he determined that they were either conducting a really realistic drill or there was an actual emergency.
Just doodly-doo, checking it out. You guys good?
After he got a call from the Norway defense minister, Skorgen called the Russian North Fleet commander. He had a direct line to Admiral Popov in Severomorsk. This was put in 1999. It was like a diplomatic arrangement between them, since they were such close neighbors, if not friends, right? Because they were adversaries in the Cold War.
Yeah.
The only time this phone was ever used is by the technicians who tested it once a year.
Oh.
So these admirals had never used it to call each other. Now, they had met.
But this was not something that was routinely used.
No. It was a big deal. So the phone is answered by a duty officer. Popov was at sea at the rescue site.
He was a little busy.
Right. So Skorgen requested a report on what was going on with the exercise and offered assistance if the Russian Navy needed any. He was asked to hold, and a minute or so later, he was told that Admiral Popov sends his regards, the situation is under control, and we have no need for any assistance. He thanks you for your kind offer.
Good Lord.
Down in the UK, in Britain, at the Royal Navy headquarters in North London, Commodore David Russell, who was the acting flag officer of submarines, while his boss was away on holiday, got a call as he arrived on Monday morning from the duty officer at what was called the Hole, which is basically the UK's military intelligence center. They told him of a whole bunch of unexpected naval activity in the Barents Sea. They weren't sure what was going on, but they'd keep him informed. So along with Norway and the UK, the United States was piecing things together as well.
So the Norwegians, Brits, and US were not talking to each other. They were all independently figuring this out.
Essentially, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Around the same time, in Russia, two main information agencies issued news flashes to Moscow's newspapers and government departments. I'm going to quote it. Starting at 11:03, there are reports from the press service of the Northern Fleet about malfunctions on board the multi-purpose nuclear-powered submarine, the Kursk. The crew, as reported by the military, is alive, and communications with them are being maintained with the help of special signals using tapping methods.
Oh, no! So they're all alive in there? Or a lot of them?
This is what the news report that was put out by the Russian agencies read.
Oh.
6 minutes later, Russia's main TV channel, RTR, announced the nuclear-powered submarine, the Kursk, is lying on the bed of the Barents Sea. There are no nuclear weapons on board the submarine. Unofficial queries from the Norwegian side are being made about the state of radiation levels and about the possibility of offering assistance. Another statement said the accident happened on Sunday.
But it didn't.
No, it happened on Saturday.
Okay.
Later that day, the Russian Northern Fleet press office put out an update. During maneuvers of the Northern Fleet, at the appointed time, the multi-purpose submarine Kursk did not communicate. As a result of timely measures by the Northern Fleet Command, it was possible to locate the submarine. The rescue efforts are being led by Admiral V. Popov. There is contact with the crew.
Do we have any evidence that they had contact with the crew, or is that just news reports?
So there are reports from the Russian Navy that they had heard tapping. It's a little murky, but I'll tell you this. I've served with a lot of people who were at various on platforms with people who were on watch with sensors capable of hearing the explosions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people talk about hearing SOS like tapping.
Oh,
coming
sweet
from
Moses. Oh, that's painful.
There were many outside Russia who knew that these were lies. Most wouldn't speak on it or risk admitting the existence of clandestine assets in the area. But Frode Ringdahl, the Norwegian science guy,
Gotcha. Yep.
could speak to the seismic waves.
Frode!
And when he realized what his data meant, there was no technical fault.
Yeah.
And it was Saturday, not Sunday.
Did he put it out there?
He called the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Norwegian information slowly made its way into the media, but Russia stuck to its story.
Of course it did. Russia always does.
Norway had already made an offer to assist, but the debate was now underway in the US and the UK. They were aware that Western rescue technology was way more sophisticated than what the Russians had at this time, because they knew that their rescue services had been in pretty sharp decline.
Yeah, they were spying on him. They knew everything.
But some were worried about being accused of causing or provoking the incident.
That is so dumb. Just save these people.
That was a big argument, was the humanitarian factor of this.
It should be.
It shouldn't matter. There's people in trouble. Go
There are
help.
human souls down there. Someone go get these guys.
Some were asking if they should respond at all. They should wait for the Russians to ask. Or maybe, Russia might think the offer of help was an attempt at espionage.
Who cares what they think? Go save these people.
Now, especially within the Pentagon, they had pretty greatly underestimated Russian engineering. They thought from the data that came in that everyone on board must be dead with the size of that explosion.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm an expert, but...
So that kind of took the urgency out of the debate.
But they're hearing the tappies.
But then, of course, the lawyers are involved too. Is there going to be legal liability if we fail in our rescue attempt?
This is the dumbest argument.
Who's actually got jurisdiction in this rescue? So, it's dumb. It's going to get worse. So look, Washington made an offer of help to the Russians, but also concluded that it would probably be better for the UK and Norway to lead the rescue efforts because of their proximity and it's less inflammatory. Now, the US offer of help was rejected pretty handily, pretty quickly.
What would have happened if they had just gone and saved them?
There's a chance they could have saved some. Now, this idea that the UK and Norway should lead the rescue efforts is probably not a bad idea. While we had decent rescue technology, it was nowhere in the vicinity. And when I say we, I mean US.
This is all the dumbest thing ever.
It takes time to transport. Speed is of the essence. The sailors don't have the time.
I understand what you're saying. It's just the fact that there's this much whinging.
Oh, yeah.
Is killing me.
Now, UK did at the time have the absolute best rescue submersible, the LR-5.
So go.
But it was in the Mediterranean.
So go anyway.
While this debate went on, Commodore David Russell, the UK acting director of submarines, had started contingency planning as soon as he heard the news of the Kursk. He knew that speed was essential for the survivors to have any chance. So without clearance from London,
good,
or any request from Russia,
good,
he started redeploying services.
Thank God.
He leased a cargo plane to fly the LR-5 from the Mediterranean.
This is some spicy shit.
He began searching for a mothership that could launch it, and he found one, the Norman Pioneer. It was up in the Norwegian Sea. And then real quickly around this, the UK did actually make a formal offer of help to Russia.
But while putting in action actual rescue plans.
Well, yeah, he kind of did this on it. Russell did this on his own.
Russell's my favorite.
So Russell's awesome. They hadn't gotten any response from the Russians by the end of the day.
Of course not.
Monday evening, Vladimir Koyedov, the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy. There's a lot of Vladimirs in this story. It's a very popular name.
I mean, that's a big name in Russia.
He made his first public comments. He said the Kursk is deep in silt and listing to port by 30 degrees. Now, this number, 30 degrees, it changes a lot in the story. At some points, it reaches up to 60 degrees.
Well, all right.
Now, it's tilting to one side or the other.
Right.
It's listing over pretty hard is what he says. There are reasons to believe there has been a big and serious collision. The situation is difficult. It is possible that not everything will turn out well.
They knew it wasn't a collision, right? They heard booms and no one got hit.
that they know of.
All right.
Collisions had happened before, and they got more and more likely as subs got quieter and quieter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The subs getting quieter and quieter is kind of driven pretty hard by espionage.
Right. They got to be sneaky. That's what subs are for.
Before, leading up into the Cold War, the Russian submarines weren't anything near what we had, but they got a big jump. There was the Walker-Whitworth spy ring. A couple of guys in sensitive positions in the U.S. were funneling information out to the Russians, and it allowed them to figure out how to make their subs quieter. There was, I forget which country, I think it was Japan, and another country sold a lot more sophisticated milling equipment to the Russians, so they were able to make better parts for their submarines on their ships, so they were quieter. On Peter the Great, the ship up in the Barents Sea, the Russian ship, there were rumors of two shapes on the seabed, maybe a second submarine. Reports from the Russian defense officials of an unidentified foreign vessel sending an SOS from the area and wreckage with Western markings floating on the surface. Conspiracy theories were coming from all over.
Yep.
And a lot of these theories still persist today.
They always do with shipwrecks, I swear to God.
Mm-hmm. One important note, as we transition back to the families of these sailors on the Kursk, between them, they had 70 children.
Oh.
The families weren't being told anything. This is Tuesday, August 15th.
Good Lord.
They were clamoring for news.
I bet.
But they weren't told any. They were told there was no news. It was expected that families of those killed in service would show their patriotism by grieving in private.
Mother.
This is where I start to really piss you off. In turn, the Navy would take care of them.
Lies.
But many of these wives of these sailors were younger. They were children of the transition from communism. They snapped. They started calling radio stations, TV stations, newspapers all over to mobilize public opinion.
Damn right.
This was unheard of in the Russian military.
Navy wives don't fuck around.
Later that evening, the families were invited to an official meeting at the officers' club. Vice Admiral Valery Kazyanov and Vice Admiral Mikhail Kuznetsov and Captain Viktor Bursik addressed the families. I'm going to quote here. Yes, they are in peril, but they are alive, and our fleet is doing all it can do to rescue them. Have faith and stay patient for a little longer.
Oh, I cannot tell you how much I hate the phrase be patient.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine how much more angry I would be. Okay.
The families asked that Bursik be sent to the rescue as they knew him and they trusted him. He lived with them on the base. They knew this man personally.
Never trust an officer.
So Kazyanov agreed. Also that night, the North Fleet held a press conference, and Igor Baranov, a construction director of the Rubin Bureau, who was basically the designers of the Kursk, he extolled the virtues of the Kursk, best in the world in terms of life support, and said that the men could possibly survive for 5 to 6 days.
These are the same people who said it was unsinkable, so...
A short time later, the North Fleet Press Service officially released news that knocking had been heard from inside the Kursk. The Russian word that they used for knocking implied two-way communication.
Oh, so they were responding somehow?
Tapping from outside and tapping from inside between the rescuers and...
Man, that's... okay.
And it's pretty clear from the what I've seen, that's a straight-out lie.
Oh.
Meanwhile, Pries had made another unsuccessful dive to the Kursk. While charging again, the storm rolled in. And I already said none of Russian ships had stabilizers and thrusters. They couldn't get Pries back into the water. They were trying. It kept banging against the hull of the Rudnitsky. Its gyro compass got damaged.
Jeez.
So they suspended the effort until the weather cleared.
Good. It's fine.
So now we're on Wednesday, August 16th. Russia was having its own debate about accepting help from outside.
Cannot believe it's a debate.
They might appear callous if they refuse. Oh, but what about espionage? If the sailors die to protect their secrets, so be it. So then 2 p.m. Wednesday, Admiral Popov called Admiral Skorgan in Norway.
Okay.
Hello, Admiral Skorgan. I need your help.
Hey.
Admiral Popov, just tell me what you need and I will try to assist. So Popov asked for deep sea divers to help connect Prees to the hatch.
Okay.
Skorgan said he would check and call back. Norway didn't have any deep water divers, but offshore oil companies did.
Hey.
After a whole bunch of quick calls to various companies, they've settled on and found that Stolt offshore agreed to help.
Perfect.
They said basically, damn the cost, we'll figure that out later.
Let's do this.
Stolt also had a vessel already in the northern Norwegian Sea, the Seaway Eagle.
Oh, good. So they're already there.
And she is state of the art.
Perfect. Let's go.
Of note, Stolt is a Halliburton subsidiary.
Of course it is. I don't care.
This
Go save them.
plays hard into some of the conspiracy theories.
Oh, well.
So Skorgan calls Popov back. They would help. But Skorgan needed info. He needed to know about the submarine rescue systems, how the hatches worked, how the valves worked. He needed full technical data.
Right. Yeah, because they need to go in and save these people. They need to know what's going on.
Popov
This is not
agreed.
crazy.
Also that afternoon, officers from Russian's Navy headquarters called the British naval attaché in Moscow, Captain Geoff Macready,
Okay.
and asked what rescue technology the Royal Navy could provide. When Macready asked for information, he was told that there were only minor problems, and the sub was only listing 8 degrees.
Bless it.
No visibility problems. There were over 10 meters of visibility.
Bless it.
Forward hatch and the entire bow section were utterly destroyed. Only route in is through the aft escape hatch. Now he asked for plans of the hatch, and he was given some rough diagrams. He rushed back to the embassy, the British embassy, and contacted London. British help was now officially secured.
Perfect.
No further rescue attempts were made this day due to the storm.
Right. But we can do it tomorrow.
Thursday, August 17th. Western reports on the time of the accident, based on the hard evidence, forced Russia to concede the time of the accident, but they didn't apologize for stating that wrong.
It's Russia.
Easy math. 5 to 6 days
We're here.
is Thursday and Friday.
We gotta go.
However, Thursday morning, the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy, Admiral Kuryatov, released a statement saying the emergency supplies in the sub were enough for the sailors to live at least one more week.
Ah,
There was enough air to last them until Friday, August 25th.
lies.
Putin was still on vacation at this point.
Of course he was.
Kremlin said that he would not break off his vacation. Said he was receiving reports and his presence at the Kola Peninsula would only distract the commanders from the rescue effort.
So we should just keep hanging out on vacation. Where was he on vacation?
Down on the Black Sea, where it's less cold. Moscow newspapers went on the attack.
Good.
Where is he?
Damn right.
Right?
Because this is before he had really consolidated power, right?
Way before. This is like the first 3 months of his presidency.
Yeah, so he was not, full-blown authoritarian at this point.
But this event is kind of how he consolidated power.
Gotcha.
The steps of it. All right, we'll get to that. He definitely used it to his advantage. Now, many of the families still didn't know for sure if their sailor was on the Kursk or not.
What?
Crew swaps happen all the time. Some of them knew, like obviously the captain's wife knew.
Yeah. Oh,
A lot of
that's
the officers.
terrible.
But a good many of them still didn't know, and they weren't being told. A reporter, Vladimir Shkoda, was secretly asked if he was interested in buying the crew list for 18,000 rubles,
Oh, gee.
or the equivalent of $600. The list was published in his newspaper with the headline, "Sold for 18,000 rubles."
Was it the real list?
Yes.
Of course it was.
Back in the southern Barents, the storm finally abated.
Let's go.
Andrei Sholikov had arrived. He was the most experienced pilot of Prees. He actually came out of retirement when he heard the news of the Kursk. It just took him a little while to get up there.
I mean, it's a bit on the edge of the world here.
But
Let's go.
I include that because there was also this huge like public support for the sailors
Yeah.
too. And so like this guy told his family, like, no, I got to go.
Especially when you compare it to like Putin, who's over here on vacation.
Mm.
And then we've got some guy who's like, nope, I'm going right there. Let's go.
5:15 p.m. on Thursday, breeze went down again. They shut off everything possible to save energy. 8 times they landed on the hatch and still couldn't make a seal. And they
Was the
finally had to
hatch,
return because of low battery.
Was the hatch like busted? Or was the priest just that bad?
Well, Sholikov thought that it had to be warped
Right?
because it couldn't make a seal.
That makes sense.
Now, this story in no way reflects his skill as a pilot, because from everything I read, he was masterful and he pushed the limits of Prees to the edge.
Making contact 8 times, that does not sound like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. That sounds like somebody who didn't have a chance from the beginning.
No, he dropped right on the hatch.
Yeah.
Bester had been brought out too.
Oh, okay.
They had found a ship to put it on, and then when the storm came, they kind of like tucked it into a little inlet where it was protected, and they got it in the water, and then they tugged it out.
Our sad little orphan is on the way.
But in tugging her out, she got damaged.
Damn it.
So when they tried to send her down, she almost sank.
Good.
And only a quick acting crane operator on the Rudnitsky actually managed to save her.
Okay.
So Bester's out. In Norway, Admiral Skurgen finally got a fax with a hatch diagram that he had asked for, but they were hand-drawn.
Oh.
And much of the notes were like illegible.
Oh. Okay.
So he called Popov, and what the heck, man?
What the fuck?
Through their conversation, it was decided that Admiral Verich, the rescue chief guy, right, the rescue guy for the whole Russian fleet,
right,
would join the team on the Seaway Eagle to provide information.
Yes.
Then 2 Russian planes come flying down the Norway coast, dropping sonobuoys, which are used to detect subs. So Admiral Skorgan calls Popov again, and he said, Admiral, would you like to explain what your planes are doing off my coast?
For real?
Popov said that his intel service had told him a foreign submarine was responsible for the accident. Kursk was hit in a collision with a Western submarine.
Lies.
And that they were looking for that sub.
Bastards.
Skorgan's response is pretty awesome. He responded that he didn't believe that, and that if there had been a collision, they should be looking next to the Kursk, not off his coast.
For real?
Because let me give you a little bit of a size comparison here. I've already told you about Kursk's size. The USS Memphis, which is a Los Angeles class attack submarine, 362 feet in length.
Oh gosh, so like 2/3 the size.
Yeah. So if Kursk was damaged like that,
the Memphis is down.
Exactly. Several hours later, the USS Memphis pulled into port in Haakonsvern. It's a port in Norway that U.S. subs routinely pull into. They had left the day after the explosions, like early.
And she's fine. No damage.
Well, the arrival fueled this belief in Russia that an American sub had collided with the Kursk. Russia formally requested to inspect the hull of the Memphis.
Oh, so we're going to use this now.
The U.S., of course, denied.
Yeah, they're going to try and use this to spy on the sub. Charming.
They didn't want to set any of that precedent.
No, of course not.
At this point, data from the Memphis that they had collected was sent back to the U.S. for post-analysis, and it was pretty clear. It was massive explosions.
Are we ever going to find out what caused the explosion?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I want to know.
I know you do. I'm saving it. Friday, August 18th, in the evening, government officials came to Vidyevo to address the families. This is what's going to get you, man.
Oh, no.
They expected distress, frustration, but they were met with fury.
I bet.
Before they were even in the building, they were surrounded by the wives of the crew. They were being screamed at. Why are you here? Not out saving our men. Why the delay in asking for help? Do you even care?
Nope, they don't. Righteous indignation. I love it.
The main guy of the government officials, Ilya Klebanov, head of the Kursk Commission of Inquiry.
Okay.
He went and hid in the hallway.
Damn right.
But one mother-in-law followed him.
I love this.
She straight grabbed him by the tie, called him scum.
Because he is.
So he takes a moment to collect himself, and he walks into the hall to address the families. But before he could even start saying anything, another mother came up and just started hitting him
Good.
before she's dragged away by Navy officers.
I like that your story has someone getting punched in the face.
It's some small measure of justice. I don't know.
We'll see. Let me know what happens.
So he collects himself again. He started by saying that the rescuers were doing all that they could, and then he started listing the ships and naming the naval commanders
Because that's
that
good.
were up there. I got to tell you, I've watched footage of this. I've seen it. It can still be found in some documentaries, and this next part kind of broke me. Nadezhda Tillich. Do you remember? Told you to remember the name. She's the mother of Senior Lieutenant Sergei Tillich,
Yes.
who is on the Kursk.
Mm-hmm.
She stood up, shaking, and I'm going to quote this whole thing because it's important. So I may say nothing. I'll tell you. What decisions have you taken? How long can it last? They earn $50 a month, and now they're stuck in a tin can. What did I raise him for? Tell me, do you have children of your own? I'm sick of this mess. My husband served 25 years. Why? Tell me, what have you done? Why have you ruined our lives? No, I will never forgive you. Never. Afraid of losing your stripes, are you? Go on, tear them off. You better shoot yourselves now. We will make your lives hell.
Go, mama. Oh, I wish you guys could see poor Arin, who's tearing up over this. Mama Bear is mad.
Woo.
That's powerful.
While she's yelling this at the officials in the footage,
Yeah.
a lady comes up and seems to try and comfort her, but the camera captures a glimpse of a syringe in her hand.
Oh, no.
The whole time, Navy officers are starting to crowd around Nadezhda and press in around her. The lady with the syringe melts back into the crowd, disappears, and Nadezhda collapses into the arms of the officers, and she's dragged from the room.
Those motherfuckers.
The cameras are then ordered to be turned off.
What happens to her?
Oh, she lives.
Okay.
They just tranked her.
What?
Yeah.
Because she spoke reality to them.
And they had a fucking tranquilizer on hand for this.
They were ready.
Saturday morning, August 19th. Seaway Eagle with the Stolt divers on board and the Norman Pioneer carrying LR-5 arrive at the edge of the operation exercise area.
Okay.
And they hold the summit on board the Eagle, right, with the Russians and the UK personnel flying over.
Gotcha.
At the start of the meeting, a paper is passed around to account for everyone who's there. All the Russian officers froze, and they looked at Admiral Verich. They didn't want to sign.
Why?
Finally, they agreed to write their names. I can't tell you exactly, but they were scared of being named. The Russian hierarchy in the military is weird.
Okay.
So after this, they finally agreed to write their names. Then Verich starts in with a formal speech. But the rescuers weren't there for anything like that. They didn't give a shit
Yeah,
about
they wanted
his
to go
speech.
save these people.
Yep. And Graham Mann, the offshore manager of the Eagle, interrupted him, saying that speed was of the essence.
Damn
and
right.
explained what they could do and what they couldn't do, and asked Verich to be very clear about what the Russians wanted them to do.
Gotcha.
Verich shook his head and said, no, we are looking for the diving bell to land on the sub and for divers to gain entry to the Kursk to confirm that it is fully flooded.
What?
So, such a different story, right?
That is horrible. How long have they known that?
They
still don't know.
don't know.
They're just like, oh, go check.
This
But
one
wouldn't
is like so
opening
out of the
hatch
blue.
like that flood it if it wasn't flooded.
Exactly.
Oh my fucking. Oh my.
Russia also announced their own rescue efforts would continue for another 24 hours. Only midday on Sunday would they decide if the Western teams would be allowed to go down.
Jesus, this is infuriating.
Commodore Russell implored Verich to understand the necessity that they deploy LR-5 as soon as they arrived at the site. They couldn't waste another day. Verich declined and left with the rest of the Russian officers.
Jesus.
It was pretty clear that there was this power struggle going on in the Russian military and government.
Yeah, they're trying real hard.
Fleet officers were willing to accept help, but commanders in Moscow weren't. Their priorities in Moscow were pretty set at protecting their secrets and avoiding national humiliation.
They knew what they signed up for.
The Seaway Eagle was ordered 9 miles from the site, and the Norman Pioneer was told to anchor 14 and a half nautical miles away.
Where they're super duper helpful.
Right. Graham Mann had already put 2 dive teams into saturation after his meeting with the Russians. Now, this consists of 6 men, right? Teams of 3.
Okay.
Because they have to acclimate to the pressure.
Right.
And it takes a little while. So he wanted to be ready to go. 10:40 p.m., Admiral Verich returns to the Eagle. So Mann calls another meeting. He asked Verich for permission to start ROV operations to survey and to put divers into the water to inspect the hatch.
Make sure it's not warped. Let's go. Let's do this.
Verich said they couldn't survey the sub and had to remain aft of the emergency buoy, which is between compartments 7 and 8.
That's helpful.
For the divers, this was a huge safety concern, not knowing the details about their whole surroundings.
Good.
This discussion dragged on through the night. Mann told Verich, "We're all trying to achieve the same goal. We're all humans. We all want to try and bring people up out of the Kursk alive. Let's work together. Let's agree on a way forward right now."
Let's go. Let's do this.
Verich asked to review Mann's rescue plans again.
Of course.
This dragged on all night. Then, just after dawn, Verich broke into a smile and agreed, though he still hadn't authorized LR5.
Great.
Early Sunday morning, August 20th, Seaway Eagle...
My birthday.
It is. Moves into position and deploys the ROV, which is remote operated vehicle.
We're 8 days now, right? Okay.
They called this ROV 06. As the pilot located the Kursk, they noted that she was lying on the seabed at an angle of 8 degrees bow down. So that's back to front.
Okay.
Not much. It's pretty level. And almost no list side to side.
Okay.
The Russians had said that she was at a angle of 25 degrees with a 60-degree list.
Perfect.
There was no radiation. There was no visible damage to the hull around the 9th compartment. The hatch looked in good condition. There was no real current. Pretty good conditions.
So let's go.
But they were fed a bunch of contrary information.
Right.
10:55 a.m., the diving bell with 3 divers is lowered into the water. Tony Scott, Paul Dennison, and Jim Mullen. Now, their dive suits are pretty interesting. For working at this depth, it's really cold, especially up in the Barents Sea. So not only is oxygen fed to them through the umbilical and comms lines come down to them, but they also circulate down warm water.
Oh, okay.
Through their suits. So it's like,
keeps them warm.
like a bubble around them.
Yeah.
Keeps them from breathing.
Very important there.
First thing diver did was tap an emergency code on the hull, just in front of that hatch. The code consists of 4 sets of 4 taps.
Did he get any response?
None. Now, when I say listened, I mean he actually put the front of his helmet on the hatch so that he would feel any vibrations too.
Right. But nothing.
So he did it again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. Now, silence didn't necessarily mean there were no survivors. They could be unconscious. They could be in a state where they couldn't really... There could be a lot of reasons why they couldn't tap back.
Sure, but...
The rescuers wouldn't give up hope. Check the hatch. The hatch was in good condition. It wasn't warped.
What?
Next thing they had to do was check to see if that hatch tower thing was flooded or not.
Okay.
But they had to do this in a way that they avoided flooding the hatch.
Right.
In the compartment below.
So was it flooded?
So to test it, they had to, there's a little seal, this E valve. It's a spiral, it's like a needle configuration, and it takes several turns to open. So they could open it a little bit and observe the flow of water because they could tell if there was a pressure differential or not. The Russian specialist told the divers that the E valve opened counterclockwise, and if they turned it the wrong way, they would break it.
Cool.
It wouldn't turn. Then they started to think maybe the valve was already open. But if the valve was already open, who had opened it? Had the sailors tried to escape? Then they started thinking that there might be a body in the escape trunk.
That would make...
Which also posed a safety concern for the divers.
Right.
Now, when that escape trunk is flooded, that top hatch is supposed to pop open.
And it wasn't popped open?
No.
Okay.
It turned out that the valve actually opened clockwise, not counterclockwise.
Of course.
But when they did that, they still didn't observe any flow of water.
So does that mean it was flooded?
That means that the escape trunk was flooded.
Gotcha. Okay.
But holding on to hope, that they said it didn't mean that
everything was.
The compartment was flooded necessarily. But they were also wondering why the hatch wasn't opened.
Yeah.
The divers tied what's called the lifting bag to the hatch, and they inflated it to 550 pounds of buoyancy. Hatch still didn't open. At this point, Verich demanded that Mann rip the hatch off with the Eagle's crane.
What?
Mann refused, as there was a slight possibility that the compartment was still dry, the ninth compartment.
Yeah, and that would just kill everyone.
Verich ordered that the valve remain open from now on. When he walked away, Mann radioed the divers and told them to ignore that.
Damn right.
And to close the valve and return to the surface.
Good for him.
Oh, he was pretty pissed with Verich.
Well, yeah, that's terrible.
At this point, Admiral Popoff came over to the Eagle. There were cordial greetings, and then Popoff launched into an attack on the Eagle's team, saying that they were psychologically ill-suited for this operation.
Oh, bless it.
Mann squares up to the commander of the Northern Fleet.
Good for him.
Says, Admiral, my men have worked under the sea all their lives. They have worked on many disasters. They retrieved the dead from the Piper Alpha oil rig disaster. They pulled corpses from the Alexander Keeland platform that sank with over 100 lives off Norway. Quite frankly, they have seen far worse than those they will encounter here.
Man.
Popoff then looks at Verich, who flinched.
Good. He should be ashamed.
Popoff then says to Mann, but your techs are not trained to work on this sub. They're not familiar with Russian systems. Mann tells him that all of his officers had been misleading him about the valve. They didn't give adequate diagrams, and that as soon as they got adequate information, they'd have the job done.
Damn right.
So Popoff then offers to send 2 of the Eagle's techs to see another Oscar II submarine in Severomorsk. And Severomorsk is only about 85 miles away from this. These techs had full access to the hatch and the workings. And before leaving, though, the chief engineer of this Oscar II class submarine quietly told them that when the Oscar II is stationary, water leaks into the ninth compartment through seals around the propeller shafts.
The whole compartment?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and this was a known issue.
Oh.
This pretty much meant that using that escape trunk for the sailors who were back there was not possible.
Yeah.
Because that flooding, while it's gradual,
it's there.
It increases pressure, atmospheric pressure.
Yeah.
So they would have known that they would have died from the bends if they tried to
use it. Yeah.
8:30 p.m. Sunday. Mann again urged Verich to allow the LR-5. Verich expressed thanks for help, but believed that evidence pointed to the entire sub being flooded. He asked that both hatches be opened to confirm.
Again.
Then Verich gets a call from Popoff, and he reverses his position. They agreed that LR-5 would deploy noon on Monday. Monday morning, August 21st. While no one was down at the Kursk, the hatch opened up because it still had the bag attached to it.
Oh.
So all the evidence is pointing to the whole ninth compartment being flooded.
Yeah.
They decided to open the lower hatch. One of their ROVs was rigged to open that hatch remotely because it was too narrow to send divers in their suits through because they didn't want to risk clipping their umbilical cord.
Sure, yeah.
At 10:30 a.m., the lower hatch is opened. A few hours later, divers lowered a camera into the ninth compartment, and it was flooded, obviously. There were clear signs of a fire. Now, we come to Tuesday, August 22nd.
Could they tell if anyone had been alive before it flooded? Like, I know there was a fire, but a fire could mean... Okay, sorry.
You're all right. Tuesday, August 22nd. Putin finally comes to Viadov.
Bless it.
To address the families.
Okay.
He arrives 4 hours late.
Of course he does.
The families obviously had a lot of questions. why they did not accept foreign aid sooner, the exact timeline of what happened, why there was this difference in timelines presented, why had they stopped the rescue. Just because the ninth compartment was flooded doesn't mean that the seventh, eighth, or the eighth, seventh, and sixth weren't.
Mhm.
When would they get the bodies of their loved ones? Putin says that he was told that the Navy had all the necessary resources that they had needed initially, and that's why he didn't accept foreign aid. He told them the TV lies, the response and information flow in government had been timely. He then offers to pay the families 10 years officers' salaries,
Oh, that'll help.
give them their salaries for 10 years.
Cool.
But he didn't know what they got paid. He quoted like Norwegian Navy officers' pay. He promised to raise the Kursk and return all their family members. And he tried to explain why he hadn't come sooner, because he didn't want to, he talked about all the people that travel with him.
Talking out of his
and
ass.
all this. Well, in the end, he managed to sway the families. They thanked him. It was a very long meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, he used this event to rehab the military, start funneling more money into them. He raised military pay by 20%. And along with funding for the military, there actually was a lot of improved safety and emergency equipment.
This sounds like good things.
So there are some good things that come out of this.
Okay.
And some not good things.
Well,
He gained control of the press through this.
Oh, good.
Because in order to rehab the military, he needed the media on his side. And he basically used it to move from a free press to state media.
It's a lot easier to get all the press you need when
Mhm.
you own it.
And after this, he rose and rose in popularity. Now, there's a lot of theories on what happened.
Yeah.
Different documentaries and things present different things as what actually happened.
Sure.
One of them says that Toledo was actually up there, USS Toledo, and she went in to harass the Kursk and shadow her, and accidentally collided with the Kursk. And Memphis was there to monitor. And because Kursk got hit, Memphis heard her torpedo tubes opening. So Memphis fired on the Kursk. And it was a whole cover-up. Now, I can tell you with pretty good certainty, Toledo wasn't there. They got turned around when this whole incident went down.
Mm-hmm.
They were on their way up to relieve the Memphis, but they hadn't arrived yet.
Right. That sounds like straight conspiracies.
One of the other theories was that they were accidentally shot by one of their own surface ships.
That sounds more real.
Or another submarine in the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
The official story that came out
This is from Russia.
a year after from Russia, but it is also the most plausible, the most logical, and it makes the most sense. The exercise torpedo that they were about to fire on Saturday, that type of torpedo uses a type of fuel. It's a chemical reaction of high test peroxide, which is basically super concentrated hydrogen peroxide.
Okay.
And when it mixes with kerosene, it causes a pretty violent chemical reaction. And that's what
When it exploded.
propels the motor.
Yeah. And it exploded.
And it exploded in the torpedo tube.
Yeah.
Now,
That makes sense.
that was the first explosion. So they start taking on water, but there's also a fire in the torpedo room.
Where all those chemicals are.
With the weight of the water in the front, they're still moving forward
Right.
because their props are still moving.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is stunned by the shock wave or by the concussion. So no radio signals, nothing. They don't have time to act. It only took 2 minutes before the second explosion. And they were only in 350 feet of water. So they're now driving down.
Oh.
They impact the bottom. And that's when the second explosion goes off of the fire detonating all of the warheads on all of the torpedoes in
That
their forward
makes sense.
compartment. And it just obliterates the front end of their boat. When they were actually able to get inside the Kursk, they found one of the officers from the second compartment had been blown backwards and up with so much force that he was embedded in the ceiling.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That explosion, and I have pictures for you of the Kursk when she was raised. They cut off her nose, so remember that. And I'll post them on our site. But you can just see the devastation going back through the hull.
Oh, that's brutal.
It stopped at the reactor compartment because the reactor compartment is extra thick because
Reactor.
reactor. radiation, all that.
And that's about what, halfway through the sub? That's before these 6, 7, 8, 9 compartments.
I want to say it's the 6th compartment, but
It's before the 9th for sure.
yes.
Okay.
There were 23 men after the reactors that survived the initial blast.
How can they tell they survived? Wait, the initial blast or both blasts?
Oh, sorry, both blasts. And we know they survived till at least August 15th.
Wow.
They wrote letters.
Oh, no.
Some of them did. Only about 1 or 2 pages of these letters were actually released. There was one that was supposedly addressed to top officials that has never seen the light of day.
I mean,
but
I can see why.
The most senior in charge of these men wrote on a piece of paper all of the names of those who survived and were in the aft compartment. And he had initially said that they were going to try and get out.
Okay.
Via the escape hatch. Now, clearly that didn't happen.
Yeah.
On the back of that page, he later writes that it is dark now to see, but I will try by feel. And so he's writing in the dark. So they had lost, because the sun's not moving.
Power, yeah.
There's no power. Now, what was a mercy in this was somehow the reactors, because the Oscar IIs have twin reactors.
Okay.
Two nuclear reactors. They both shut down instead of reaching critical mass.
How is that a mercy?
It didn't become a global disaster with a nuclear explosion.
That's fair.
In the ocean.
That is a mercy. Oh, man.
On examining their bodies, the official cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, because their skin had a telltale like pinkish age to them.
So they ran out of air.
No, they were burned.
They were burned.
They all had these, as part of their kits, these essentially filters that would help exchange the air.
Okay.
Right? And so they had been hanging them up to let the air go up through because they didn't have power.
Right.
Right? The problem with these filters, because it's a chemical reaction, water doesn't play well with it.
Oh, no.
So in the dark, it appears that someone fumbled it and it contacted the water that was flooding in and exploded. Now, with all that oxygen so compressed, or that air so compressed, the fire spread much, much quicker.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear that it happened pretty quickly and that they were all standing waist deep in water, because their lower halves weren't burned, but their upper halves were torched. And then there was a couple of them that was clear they dove into the water because only their backs were scorched.
Wow.
But of course, when they came back up, there was no oxygen left because of the fire. So, yeah.
That is a horrible way to go. Like, it's bad enough that your sub exploded and you're stuck on the bottom of the ocean for, you said it was August 15th. So 3 days. And then you burned to death at the bottom of the ocean.
That was when the last letter was dated.
So they may have lasted longer.
Maybe.
I imagine
they said they could have lasted
longer.
3 to 4 days is what they thought.
Right. Oh, that's horrific. That's probably the most horrific part of the story you've told so far. That is. What a horrible way to go.
All right. So now with that all said, later, it was a pretty massive operation. It was a year later that they raised the Kursk.
Wow.
They had to do a lot of extensive planning and build a lot of stuff to actually get it up, because it was a massive, massive boat.
I'm guessing Russia did it by themselves. They didn't accept help.
No, they hired a company.
Oh, okay.
To come in and do it. But that's a whole other, podcast. Initially, 12 bodies were recovered from the Kursk in 2000.
Only 12. Okay.
The others in the aft compartment, because that's all they could reach, were like kind of inaccessible. They were too far into like the machinery spaces and whatnot. And so the rest of them were recovered.
When they raised it.
When they raised it.
Okay.
I think the only ones that they couldn't really recover were those that were in the torpedo room.
Well, I mean, I imagine there wasn't anything left.
Later, Russia held a posthumous ceremony for the dead.
Okay.
Where they were honoring the sailors of the Kursk. And Nadezhda Tilik, if you remember her.
Mama Bear.
Mm-hmm. She got up to speak.
Was her kid one of the ones in the aft compartment?
I'd have to look at the list again.
I'd want to know.
Nadezhda Tilik got up to speak at this ceremony, and this is broadcast everywhere. I want those children to grow up knowing their fathers died because of neglect, incompetence, and plain indifference of the powers that be. I feel sorry for those responsible for this tragedy, for those forced to lie to the families of the dead. They will bear the heavy burden of sin on their souls. Find courage and repent before it is too late.
Good for her. Wow, that's powerful.
And that concludes my retelling of the sinking of the Kursk. What do you think?
That was, do you remember the first time you tried to tell me about this?
Vaguely.
Because you didn't try to tell me, you tried to show me a movie. It was date night. And it was the first and only time I let you pick the movie for date night, and you picked the movie of the Kursk. And I had forgotten most of it until you were talking about it, because we only made it till like right after the explosion, and I turned and looked at you and was like, are you kidding me right now?
Was it the Kursk or was it K-41?
I don't know. I just remember
because Russia had several submarine disasters.
Blew up, and there was people stuck in a sub, and you had told me, because I have this obsession with movies where everyone dies. I love movies where everyone dies. So I understand why you chose a movie where everyone dies, but it was just so sad. And I bring it up just because the story is even sadder than the movie. Though I will say, I feel like you horrified yourself more than you horrified me. And I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I love that you're willing to do this podcast with me and willing to dig deep into stories that make you so sad, because it is a powerful one. That's a big one.
Well, I mean, you know me. Whenever it's family of service members and stuff like that, and them being screwed around and lied to, that the families of victims of tragedies in general, that one really, really gets my blood going.
I'm not going to lie. It particularly hits me hard when people screw around with military families. And obviously, we have not been in a situation where, you died and we got screwed around for that.
Clearly.
But we've been screwed around, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just relate on a very, very small, infinitesimal level with just how much it sucks, because you have no power as a military family to do anything about it, and even more so in Russia. And that's really painful and really hard to see, but also seeing Mama Bear from this story stand up like that it was really amazing.
Nadezhda is one of my favorites.
Nadezhda is badass, and I really liked Russell, I think it was.
Commodore Russell?
Yeah, he was badass too. There was some really cool, like, what the fuck, guys, people stepping up in this story, and I like that. I like it when the people push back.
Yeah, and I told you at the beginning that Admiral Popov, the commander of the Northern Fleet, was an interesting character, because he's stuck between orders from Moscow and just actually trying to save his men.
I mean, I still think he's a douchebag, but I can understand why. I think everyone in the Russian command could have tried harder.
Oh my God, yes.
And people died because they did not try harder. He could have saved those people, and he didn't. So I don't feel bad not liking him.
I mean, that's fine.
Everyone is a shade of gray. Hitler was an artist before he was Hitler. We all have our moments of goodness or evil, depending. And ultimately, this man allowed these people to die. It's on his soul. It is. It's on Putin's soul. It's on all of their souls. And fuck them.
Your PSA from Katie.
My PSA from Katie. Do you feel good?
I enjoyed sharing the story with you.
Good. I really enjoyed listening to you tell it. I love it when you tell me stories about this stuff. Yeah, I think my main takeaway here, beyond just really enjoying the story, is you are very, very sweet. I cannot believe your own episode made you cry.
I thought I'd be all right, but some of those hit.
They hit hard, especially, I felt that when I was talking about Aberban. There's something about saying it out loud compared to listening to it or watching it or reading about it. But you being the one to deliver that information hits different.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that you tried to horrify me and horrified yourself.
No, I thought for more than anything that you were going to be mad.
I am mad. I'm real mad.
Yeah.
But I'm always mad. So with that, we're going to roll it out here. We have socials. We are just about everywhere under Catastrophe Chronicles or Catastrophe Chronicles Pod. Please feel free to email us at catastrophechroniclespod@gmail.com. Check out our website at www.catastrophe-chronicles.com.
Didn't we put up a tip jar on that one?
I was getting to that.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
at www.catastrophe-chronicles.com. And if you want to help the podcast, we would love it if you would rate and review us on whatever your podcasting app is. And then if you want to help us financially, help pay for our hosting stuff, there's a ton of little things that we're doing, and eventually we'd like to upgrade our equipment. We have a tip jar that's linked in the episode description. It's also linked on our website and a couple other places. If you want to throw a few bucks our way, we'd appreciate it, but don't feel obligated.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
And stay curious.